this is Mrs. Smekens, and this is the last lesson in our series about tracking characters. And we've worked for several lessons now at really looking carefully at how authors develop characters so that we can then make inferences, claims, opinions. We can draw some conclusions. We can draw conclusions about the relationship of different characters. We can draw conclusions about a character's trait or personality. And we can draw conclusions about what we believe the author's theme, central message, or life lesson is for the reader to learn. Now, we know that readers not only have to be able to think like this, they also have to be able to articulate this thinking in writing. And that's what this lesson is about. How to take what we've learned and put it into a written response, because that's part of mastery. A reader has to be able to not just explain their thinking orally in class discussions, but also clarify their thinking with evidence from the text in writing. So I'm actually going to take down this anchor chart. I'm not going to add any more to this anchor chart. We're not going to talk specifically about how to track characters for this last lesson. We're going to use that knowledge, but what I want to do is remind you of what we have learned previously about writing a constructed response. Okay, so this should look familiar. We had talked about how you make an inference, and that's what we've been doing this whole lesson focus is collecting details, putting them together to make a variety of inferences. But if we're going to explain that in writing, then we have to first lead. The first sentence we write should be our inference, our answer, the conclusion that we've drawn. We also previously learned that when you write that inference, it should then be followed with textual evidence. And we use some of these sentence starters or something like it to reveal details that were helpful in making the inference. And those details are then called evidence because they back up your conclusion, your claim, your opinion. Okay, well, in this lesson, I want to use that knowledge that we've learned previously about how to write our thinking and add a little more to it. I want to add two things. First, as we look at our screen here, I want you to understand that when you're writing a response to theme, that two pieces of evidence isn't going to be enough. We're going to need at least three. Okay, so as I add a third piece of evidence up here, let me explain why. The idea is that if a character has learned this, remember what we know about the character before the incident, the character after the incident, and the realization that they made during the climax. Okay, all three of those parts need to be referenced in the details to support your claim. And so when you write your support or proof for what you think the theme or central message is, you're going to want to reference what the character was like at the beginning, before the incident, what the character was like right at that climactic moment when they're having the aha, and what they're like now at the end, now that they've learned the lesson. You have to prove they've learned the lesson. You have to prove they didn't know the lesson to begin with. And you want to justify that moment, that aha, when they're during or within that realization. Okay, so I'm adding another piece of evidence. And this isn't just true for when you're writing a constructed response about theme. If you're writing anything in supporting it with evidence from the text, two pieces of evidence is minimum. You can always have a third or a fourth or a fifth. So don't get in the habit of just enough. I only need two. You know what? The more you have, the stronger your claim is, your argument, your opinion. All right, now I want to add something else to this, okay? I want to also teach you in this lesson that whenever you write a written response, you want to lead with a little bit of context. Your first sentence should be your answer. Yes, in this case, the theme. But we don't want to just, bam, throw the theme at the reader. We don't want to just hit them over the head. They're like, what are you talking about? Where's this coming from? We need a little context. And so we want you to restate, repeat, let me use that, repeat some key words from the original question or prompt. Okay, now you don't have to do much, but you need a little context. You can't just start. You just can't say, people should, you can't just start with the theme. Why? Where's this coming from? What are you even talking about? We need some context. And that's what repeating a couple words from the original question or prompt will do. And I'm not kidding. A couple words is all we need. Okay? And that feeds right into the answer. So the first couple words you write should actually be from the question or prompt. You mention a few things for context and go right into your answer. In this case, the theme. Period. That's your first sentence. Okay? Then we need evidence from the beginning that he didn't know the lesson. Evidence from the middle that he's learning the lesson. Evidence from the end that he has acquired, he believes, he's changed, and now understands this life lesson. 3 detailed evidence sentences, okay, following an original sentence of the theme itself. Okay, so with this said, let's take what we did in the last lesson when we were looking at thank you, ma'am, and Roger having learned from Mrs. Jones a couple possible themes, okay? So if we just make up this question, this prompt, identify one theme evident within thank you, ma'am, support your answer with textual details, we could use either of these, okay? So in the previous lesson, we talked about, well, one theme could be that people can grow and mature from honest feedback. Okay. Another theme could be when people show compassion, it motivates others to be kind. Okay. Now, do you see what I mean by you can't just start writing your response and lead with that? We need a little context. You can't just, if I was reading your written response, okay, keeping in mind that you can't presume they read the original passage and the question. They're just reading your written response. Well, your response should stand alone. It should make sense all by itself. And so if all of a sudden you just hit the reader with, people can grow and mature from honest feedback, it's like, what? What are you talking about? Where's this coming from? We need a little context, not a lot, but would you use a couple of the words from the actual question or prompt as you kind of lead into this thematic statement, this conclusion or thesis? So I've got an example here. Okay, so that's the same original question, and I'm going to go into that grow and mature life lesson. But instead of looking at it in this version, let's look at it in the color-coded broken version. Okay, let me break it down for you. Okay, so rather than just starting with people can grow and mature from honest feedback of others, let's use a little context, okay? One theme revealed in thank you, ma'am. Look, identify one theme within thank you, ma'am. So I could just do that, one theme. I could add the author. One thing Langston Hughes reveals in thank you, ma'am is, boom, now go into your answer. So the first sentence needs to give your answer, in this case, the theme, but we need a little context, all right? You don't have to go over the top and give me too many words, but just a little bit. Okay, so we've given the inference. Now I want to do evidence. And remember, I'm going to need 3 pieces of evidence because I need to talk about the beginning, the middle, and the end. Before we learn the lesson, when we're realizing the lesson, and after, near the end, what do we now know about this character? Okay, so 3 separate sentences of evidence. Okay, so look, this first piece of evidence says when the story begins. See, I know the detail has to come from the beginning. When the story begins, a deprived Roger runs up behind Mrs. Jones and tries to snatch her purse. Okay, so that's my detail that he doesn't know about maturity, growth, being a good person. All right, and begins. So I'm claiming it was at the beginning. I'm even using quotes around keywords. All right, then in the events that follow, implying the middle. Mrs. Jones confronts his choices, sharing that she too has wanted things she could not get and has done things too. And so this idea of pulling actual details from the text, okay, but she's confronting him. All right, this is when he's starting to realize it. She's coming at him with, come on, let's change our ways here. Okay, then her final piece of evidence is shoes come by devilish like that will burn your feet. And he responds with, thank you, ma'am. Evidence he is learning, right? Okay, now this last sentence is just a concluding statement to wrap it all up. And we haven't talked about this, but that's just good writing to have a concluding statement. Mrs. Jones' confession, coupled with her upright lifestyle, provide Roger the motivation he needs to change his ways. Brings me back to my original theme statement. Okay, you see what we're doing here? Okay, we're just taking the original theme, the statement that we had kind of developed from the last lesson, and now we're putting it into a full-on response, okay? Textual evidence support your claim, and we need a little context. That's just what good writers do. Good readers and good writers do. So let's kind of look at this next one and start to break it down, and you tell me what should be these sentences. So if the question was, describe a central message developed within thank you, ma'am. Use details to support your answer. And now we are going to use this one, okay? This theme, possible theme, when people show compassion, it motivates others to be kind. Okay, so if this is the original question or prompt, and you need to repeat some key words, and then go into the theme, how might you start that first sentence? Okay, let's look at it this way. What are some words, some phrases from the question or prompt you might use? Just identify some that you would, okay, a central message, okay? And then the title of the text, thank you, ma'am. Yeah, because you can have a central message and a lot of different things, but you name the text, and now I know this message goes with this text. Okay, so a central message within thank you, ma'am is when people show compassion, it motivates others to be kind. Perfect. That's it. You just did it. Okay? Repeat, inference, period. Okay? Then we go into evidence. You need 3 pieces of evidence, and I'm wondering, can you just pluck any 3 pieces of evidence? No. Your evidence for theme has to come from specific places. So the first piece of evidence has to demonstrate what? The character in what state? Before he's learned the lesson. Then we need evidence of somewhere from the middle in that climax when he's having the aha. What's this last piece of evidence supposed to demonstrate? That he's learned the lesson. All right. You're on a roll. So again, here's a full-blown response. But if I break it down, central message revealed is that when people show compassion, it motivates others to be kind. Here we go. After Roger initially attempts to steal the purse, this is the beginning. This is I have not learned the lesson yet. She claims he ought to be her son and she'd teach him right from wrong, all right, because he needs to learn this lesson. Although frightened, she then provides Roger with a clean towel to wash his face, a comb to run through his hair to look presentable, and she makes him supper. This is when he's like, what's going on? She's being so nice. And it's at that point that he is sitting on the bed and he wants to make sure she can see him, that he hasn't run away, that he isn't going through her pocketbook, that he's just sitting there, that he's learned. He does not want to be mistrusted. He wants her to trust him. He's learned it. He's motivated to be a better person now because of her compassion. There it is. Before or beginning, middle, end. Again, concluding statement, which we haven't talked about, but just good writers do it. When Mrs. Jones showed concern and compassion for Roger, he, in turn, wanted to do right by her. There you go, you guys. This lesson isn't so much about tracking characters anymore. Now, we're talking about once you can do that kind of thinking, you have to be able to put it in writing. And we already knew a little bit about how to write a written response, but we're just making our responses a little stronger now with a little context and additional evidence. Okay, so if you were in Mrs. Smekens' class, then I would have you going back to Jesus : remember, little things are big, okay? And so I would want you to go back to your Jesus : essay. All right. And you can click on the hyperlink and listen to it again if you want. You've already, from the previous lesson, kind of dove into this, figured out what Jesus was like at the beginning, what he thought and believed, and what he was like at the end. And you should have already kind of figured out what he learned in order to get kind of a theme, right? A single sentence lesson that was learned. Okay. So now I want you to take that and I want you to actually flesh out the full constructed response. So you're only going to write 4 sentences, okay? You're going to write 4 sentences. You're going to repeat some keywords from that prompt, okay, that question, as you then go right into, so what theme, what's one theme that we get from Jesus : essay? And then I want you to give me a piece of evidence before he learned that lesson, while he was having the aha, and now, afterwards, since the incident, who is he now? All I'm looking for is 4 sentences, all right? You can just type these, you can handwrite these out. I'm just looking for 4 sentences. Now, I'll give you the essay again. I'll give you the character change chart in case you didn't do this in the last lesson. I'll also give you some theme topics to kind of ground your thinking on what the theme statement could be. It could come out of some of these topics. So if you were in Mrs. Smekens' class, you would be generating a constructed response to little things are big. Name the theme and give me 3 pieces of evidence. If you're in Mrs. Smekens' class, that's what we'd be doing, but your teacher might have a better idea.